The year is 1876. The United States sends its celebrated officer, George Custer, to break Sitting Bull's resistance in Montana. But when the general reaches the top of a hill, he sees far more tents than he anticipated. Custer doesn't hesitate. He smiles, raises his hat, and shouts, "Hurrah, boys, we've got them!" What he doesn't know is that he's stepping into one of the largest Native American war camps ever assembled, and no reinforcements are coming to save him. Within an hour, every one of his men is dead. Custer's name becomes tied not to glory, but to one of the worst military disasters in American history. So how did it all go so wrong? This is the incredible story of Custer's last stand. On the research, George Custer was the son of an Ohio farmer. He was fiercely ambitious, desperate for fame and a place in history. Even as a boy, he was sharp-witted, daring, and proud. He entered West Point in 1857, where he was disciplined 726 times for misconduct, more than any cadet before him. Yet his instructors and peers couldn't deny that the troublemaker had the makings of a great soldier. The Civil War gave him the chance to prove it. Custer was a brilliant officer, winning battle after battle while leading his men from the front. He gained a reputation for charging into fights others avoided, never asking his troops to do anything he wouldn't do himself. His soldiers adored him, and his superiors were so impressed that at just 23, he became one of the youngest generals in U.S. history. The press called him the Boy General. Soon everyone knew of the fearless General Custer, with his flashy style and long golden hair. Before we continue, please like and subscribe to support the project. On July 3, 1863, Custer and his men held the Union line at Gettysburg. Riding at the front in full uniform, he led a crucial charge that turned the battle in the Union's favor. His leadership continued until the war's end. The table on which Robert E. Lee surrendered was later given to Custer's wife, inscribed with the words, "No man did more to secure this surrender than your husband." After the war, Custer was assigned to lead the 7th Cavalry against the Plains Indians. He resented the assignment, believing it offered no chance for glory. It wasn't until 1868 that he found another opportunity. As the U.S. pushed westward, it set its sights on the Black Hills. The Sioux who lived there had no intention of giving them up. In April 1868, the Sioux and the U.S. signed the Fort Laramie Treaty, granting the Sioux rights to the land if they stopped attacking settlers and stayed on a reservation. But the U.S. never planned to honor the agreement. The Black Hills were too valuable, and officials expected settlers would provoke the Sioux into breaking the treaty. Most Sioux agreed to the deal, except Sitting Bull. A Lakota leader, Sitting Bull refused to accept the treaty. He believed the U.S. would take their land regardless, and that resistance was the only way to preserve their way of life. Sitting Bull was nothing like Custer. Where Custer was reckless, Sitting Bull was thoughtful. His name came from his habit of careful deliberation. But he wasn't just a warrior. He was also a spiritual leader, claiming visions from the Great Spirit that guided him against the Americans. He rallied Lakota warriors and allied Cheyenne bands, forming a coalition to resist American expansion. Alongside his trusted friend and lieutenant, a Lakota named Gall, he launched raids on U.S. settlements and rival tribes like the Crow. In late 1868, the U.S. needed someone bold to stop Sitting Bull. They turned to George Custer. That October, Custer and the 7th Cavalry set out along the Washita River in Oklahoma. Winter was coming, and the native camps were vulnerable. On November 27th, at dawn, Custer led a charge into a Cheyenne village, cutting down everyone in sight. Many were women and children. His second-in-command, Major Joel Elliott, took 20 men to pursue fleeing warriors. Custer finished the attack in the camp, killing 103 Cheyenne. He saw it as a triumph, but his ambition blinded him to the consequences. First, the village belonged to a Cheyenne chief friendly to the U.S., making peace impossible. Second, Dozens of other villages along the river were alerted, forcing Custer to retreat. Third, Major Elliott never returned. With enemy warriors mobilizing, Custer chose not to wait. Elliott and his men were found dead weeks later. Custer was furious. Though Benteen remained under his command, their feud never ended. The Washita victory restored Custer's fame, casting him as a hero of the West. For years afterward, he led the 7th Cavalry against native resistance. In 1873, he was permanently stationed at Fort Abraham Lincoln in Dakota, closer to Sitting Bull's stronghold. Two key figures entered his life then. Major Marcus Reno, a short-tempered officer with a drinking problem, despised Custer's arrogance. But Custer had loyal supporters too: his brothers Tom and Boston, his brother-in-law James Calhoun, and his wife, who joined him at the fort. He also had native allies. In 1873, a half-Sioux, half-Arikara scout named Bloody Knife joined Custer's unit. The two became close friends. Bloody Knife had a personal grudge against Sitting Bull and Gall, who had bullied him as a child and later killed his brothers and son. In 1874, Custer led an expedition into the Black Hills. Officially, it was to scout a fort site. In reality, it was a search for gold and a propaganda campaign to lure settlers. The mission faced little resistance. Custer spent more time hunting with his brothers and Bloody Knife than fighting. Photographers and journalists accompanying the expedition published stories and images of Custer's thrilling frontier exploits and the discovery of gold. His expedition sparked a gold rush. By late 1875, over 15,000 settlers had poured into the region. Officially, since these were independent prospectors, the U.S. government could claim it wasn't violating the Fort Laramie Treaty. Unofficially, President Ulysses S. Grant fully endorsed the influx, waiting for Sitting Bull and the Lakota to retaliate, giving him an excuse to seize the Black Hills outright. In September 1875, Washington made a final offer to purchase the land peacefully. Sitting Bull's warnings had been right. The Americans would never stop coming. The Sioux refused the deal, prompting Grant to issue an ultimatum. Any Lakota or Cheyenne not on reservations by January 1876 would be deemed hostile. The demand was impossible. Delivered in November 1875, deep into winter, compliance would mean freezing to death. It was a blatant injustice. On May 17, 1876, the expedition to crush Sitting Bull's resistance departed Fort Abraham Lincoln. General Alfred Terry, a Custer ally, held overall command. Scouts reported Sitting Bull's forces were camped along the Yellowstone River near the confluence of four tributaries: the Powder, Tongue, Rosebud, and Bighorn. Terry and Custer would advance westward from Dakota, while General John Gibbon approached from Montana and General George Crook from Wyoming. The plan was to encircle the native forces, cutting off all escape routes. Custer treated the campaign like a leisurely outing, frustrating even Terry with his detours for hunting trips with his brothers. Major Reno and Captain Benteen. Reno was briefly relieved when Terry sent him to scout the Rosebud River, where he discovered Sitting Bull's trail. He rushed back with the news, only for Custer to dismiss him as a coward for not pressing further. With the trail hot, there was no time for arguments. Terry split the forces again. He would join Gibbon and advance down the Bighorn from the north, while Custer followed the Rosebud south. If Custer found Sitting Bull, he was to hold position and wait for Terry's arrival. But expecting Custer to wait was like expecting a wolf to ignore fresh prey. As he rode off, his colleagues joked, "Don't be greedy, leave some for us." Custer's reply was firm, "I will not." The Americans were correct about Sitting Bull's location. After Grant's ultimatum, the Lakota leader had rallied thousands more warriors. They knew this summer might be their last as free people. Sitting Bull's call brought nearly 8,000 Lakota and Cheyenne to his camp. Alongside his trusted lieutenant, Gall, new leaders emerged, none more formidable than Crazy Horse. A young fearless Oglala Lakota, Crazy Horse, claimed spiritual visions that made him invincible. On June 17th, his scouts spotted Crook's troops camped along the Rosebud. With 1,500 warriors, Crazy Horse did the unthinkable. He attacked an equally sized U.S. force head-on. His tactics were brilliant. Warriors swarmed Crook's men from all sides, denying them a moment to regroup. Only the intervention of Crow and Shoshone scouts allowed Crook to retreat, losing 30 men. It was a staggering victory. One Crook failed to communicate to Custer or Terry. Sitting Bull, now aware of approaching troops, moved his people to the Valley of the Greasy Grass, near the Little Bighorn River. As they celebrated the Sundance ceremony, Sitting Bull had another vision, hundreds of soldiers falling into the camp. He took it as a sign of coming triumph. Meanwhile, Custer followed the trail toward the Bighorn, unaware of Crook's defeat. Scouts like Bloody Knife warned that the trail indicated thousands of warriors, far more than expected. Bloody Knife urged waiting for reinforcements, but Custer ignored him. At dawn on June 25th, scouts spotted smoke from Sitting Bull's camp. Custer's mind was made up. Today was his day of glory. He divided his 700 men into 3 groups. One company guarded supplies, the rest prepared to attack. Custer would lead 5 companies across the river from the north. Reno, with 3 companies and Bloody Knife scouting, would strike from the south. Benteen, with 3 more, would flank the camp from the west. Though Custer distrusted Reno and Benteen, his inner circle, his brothers Tom and Boston, and brother-in-law Calhoun, rode with him. Concealed behind hills, Custer finally crested a ridge at 3:30 p.m. and saw the sprawling camp. Thousands of lodges stretched over 3 miles. He hastily scribbled, "Hurrah, boys, we've got them!" and charged. To the south, Reno's 150 men crossed the river. Bloody Knife and scouts clashed with Lakota warriors on the camp's outskirts, the first warning of the attack. Sitting Bull and Gall, positioned in the southern sector, were the first to face Reno's advance. Reno ordered his men to dismount and form a firing line. Bullets tore through the camp, striking warriors and families alike. Sitting Bull's immediate concern was protecting the vulnerable. He sent his nephew and another warrior to parley with the attackers.